Welcome. My name is Jay Otto, and I'm with the Center for Health and Safety Culture at Montana State University. And this is a brief webinar on the summary of a dating violence survey that we recently completed. Our center seeks to conduct research around how culture influences health and safety. We address a variety of behaviors. We look at traffic safety, substance abuse, as well as violence, including child maltreatment and child well-being. And we really want to see how we can leverage positive aspects of culture to improve health and safety. This is a very brief map of current and past projects. So as you can see, we engage in projects all across the country with a variety of stakeholders. We do work with some national sponsors, quite a number of projects with state sponsors. We also do work at the community level, both with communities working on various issues and sometimes projects with schools. So for this webinar, we're going to do a brief background about the topic. We're going to talk a little bit about the methods we used for the survey and the topics that we explored. We'll spend the bulk of the time looking at the results and briefly talk about some next steps. I think if you're watching this webinar, you probably have some familiarity around violence and its impact. It certainly has a significant impact on both men and women in our country, as well as many other countries. High degree of prevalence among adults. We also see the prevalence high among high school students, and that those negative impacts of violence, in particular dating violence and other forms of violence, can result in physical and mental health consequences. I think it's also important to recognize high school as an opportunity where certain relationship patterns are being established. And so we can think about engaging with high school students also from the perspective of helping to establish healthier and safe behaviors for their future. So not only impacting the immediate consequences as they're high school students, but also how we can establish those patterns later in life. So we engaged in a survey to begin to explore from our lens some of the culture around dating violence. We reviewed the literature and we developed a survey exploring 8 different behaviors around dating violence. We had students, some high school students, review these surveys. We listened to their feedback, made some modifications to the language. The survey was reviewed and approved by the Montana State University's Institutional Review Board. We then recruited a national sample of students using an internet-based survey. We engaged a partner, Qualtrics, to recruit the panel. The participants were given a modest incentive to participate in the survey. That might have been some points towards an award or other things like that. We specifically were seeking older students. These were students age 18 to 20 who were still in high school. This is a complex issue, and there are issues around mandatory reporting with younger students. So for this sample, we specifically focused on those age 18 to 20. The survey was completed last November of 2016, and we had 241 students complete the survey. We asked the students to self-identify their sex, and as you can see, we had 54% female, 41% male, 4% transgender, and 1% not sure. The results that we're going to look at, because we're going to divide those results by self-reported gender, female and male, you'll see as we look at the results. We did not include the responses from those who indicated transgender or not sure. The number of responses there was very, very small. We're uncomfortable looking at those as being representative of any larger group because of such a small number. So we are just looking at the results of those who self-identified as female and male. We had participants from 48 states. As you can see, they had a variety of geography in terms of urban, suburban, and rural. And they came from a variety of size of schools, with about half of them coming from sort of the larger schools, 500 or more students. We did ask the students to indicate whether they had engaged in sort of dating behavior, been in a relationship with somebody in the past 12 months. About 2 out of 10 had indicated they had not been in such a behavior or not been in a dating relationship. About half had dated one person And you can see about 30% 2 or 3 people and 4% 4 or more people. Even though we had about 18% who had not been in a relationship, we still wanted, the results you're seeing includes their responses. We really wanted to see what everyone was thinking, not necessarily just those who were in a dating relationship. So we, on the survey, examined 8 different dating violence behaviors. These include stalking behaviors, harassing behaviors, as well as assault. These come from the literature as a variety of unsafe behaviors, and we really wanted to explore this range. As you'll see in the responses, when we look at perception of harm and acceptance, it varies based on different kinds of behaviors. For the results that I'm going to share with you today, we elected to focus just on 4 of the 8 behaviors. As you will see, there's a lot of information, and it's simply a little bit too hard to digest it all. So we elected to focus on these 4 behaviors, but the survey did gather information about all 8 for all the questions that we looked at. What we wanted to look at was the prevalence of victimization. In particular, we asked in terms of the past 12 months. We also wanted to explore their perception of harm about these behaviors, their sense of approval, their sense of control. How much would they be in control if they were in a relationship and somebody was engaging in these behaviors with them? And then finally, their willingness to intervene, in particular, intervening with a friend. And we think that's very important as we start to explore potential opportunities to address these and create healthier and safer cultures. So these were the 5 topics that we explored in the survey. As you'll see, the results, we generate a lot of data from the survey. There are a lot of numbers, and it's a little bit easy to start to drown in the numbers. So my goal is to go slowly and share. We've aggregated the results in many different ways to try to distill the volume of information down some. I think this is something that you may want to pause this presentation so you can study the results a little bit longer. You've got to really sit with the data and make meaning with it. You might listen to this more than once because it is just a lot of information, and you'll see there are many dimensions to it. So we did divide their responses based on how they identified. So you'll see responses listed for females, and then you'll see responses listed for males. In a number of responses, in all the responses, you'll see what they said for themselves when we're asking about behaviors or beliefs. You will see in future slides, we'll also share information about what they perceived others were thinking. So that's how we begin to explore how they perceive their culture. So let's begin with the prevalence of behaviors. Again, we focus for this presentation, just on these 4 behaviors, not addressing all 8, but all 8 were asked about. So when we look at the prevalence of these 4 behaviors, first off, we can see that there were a number of students who did not date anyone or are not in a relationship with anybody in the past 12 months. We can see that on that first behavior, repeatedly contacting someone, seeing who you were with, a large number of students, both males and females, reporting that had occurred 1 or more times. Again, we've aggregated the results, so within the survey we can break that down into how many times, but we just aggregated it here in terms of presenting on this webinar. You can see that the prevalence with those experiencing threatening or aggressive comments about you was lower, but still a significant number of students experiencing that, both about 1 in 5 boys and girls. Asking you to do something sexual that you do not want to do, about half of the girls, 47%, reporting that, 28% of the boys reporting that. And then forced to do sexual things that you did not want to do, about a quarter of the girls reporting that, and 15% of the boys reporting that. It's interesting to note, we did use the exact same question as used on the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, the YRBS. That's a national instrument administered by the Centers for Disease Control. It's used in many states, not all states, but most states. And our numbers that we're seeing here are a bit higher, certainly for that last question, than what we saw on the 2015 YRBS. That's probably just a little bit indicative of our sample. Again, this was a national sample that was done with a recruiting partner that's recruiting an internet-based panel. It's not necessarily representative of the general population, although it's a pretty good indicator there. But certainly for those who were participating in this survey, they were experiencing these behaviors a bit more frequently than what we saw in a comparison to the YRBS. Okay, then we wanted to ask about some of their beliefs about these behaviors. In particular, how perception of harm. How harmful did they think these behaviors were? They were able to respond on a 7-point scale. We aggregated those results just for this presentation. So low was the lowest 2 responses. Moderate was the middle 3 responses. And high was the top 2 responses. That's how we aggregated the 7. And we asked them what they thought. We also asked them how they thought most girls in their school would respond, or what most girls believe. And we asked them what most boys in their school believed. So in this way, we start to explore their own beliefs, but also what they think others are thinking. So first off, let's explore what they believed. As you can see, with the first behavior, repeatedly contacting someone to see where they are or who they're with, relatively small number of students, both females and males, indicated that this was highly harmful. Many putting that into moderate or low. We can see those perceiving them as harmful increasing as we progress through these different behaviors. Certainly as we move to asking someone to do sexual things and forcing someone to do, we're seeing the majority of girls perceiving these as highly harmful. On the boys, that third one, asking someone to do something sexual that they did not want to do, only about half seeing that as highly harmful. But certainly when we move to forcing someone to do sexual things, most of the boys, 82%, seeing that as highly harmful. Clearly, across the board, we have opportunities to grow the perception of harm. Certainly our sense is from the research, we know these are potentially harmful behaviors. So this is clearly indicating we have some opportunity to do some education with folks and grow the sense of harm. Now we can add how they were perceiving others believed. So again, this adds a lot of numbers and just hang in there. So what we can see if we look at, first off, repeatedly contacting someone to see, we see their perceptions of how others would perceive these as harmful are similar to how they responded themselves. That's true across the board. And certainly when we see a behavior or a belief where most are not thinking it's highly harmful, they're not perceiving that most others are thinking it's highly harmful. However, it's interesting as we move into some of behaviors that they did perceive as more harmful. So making a threatening or aggressive statement about someone, most girls, 56%, perceived that was harmful. However, most girls did not perceive that most other girls would believe it was harmful. If we look there, we can see that, in fact, about 63% of the girls did not think most other girls would think it was harmful. Now it's a little bit harder on the boys' side because actually most boys did not perceive it as harmful. But again, we can look at it from what boys thought about girls. We can see that many of the boys, in fact, most of the boys, 56%, did not think most girls would think it was harmful, when in fact most girls did think it was harmful. So definitely starting to explore some of the gaps here. Now, we know we've got challenges with the data that we collected because we were not able to measure what most girls within their school thought or most boys within their school thought. This was a national sample, and we don't have any data that's representative of an individual school. Nonetheless, this was just a very formative survey that we wanted to do to begin to explore whether these kinds of gaps exist. Now, certainly if we go down to, let's say, the last behavior, we have an overwhelming majority of girls as well as the overwhelming majority of boys recognizing this behavior as harmful. We clearly acknowledge that 82% of the boys thinking this is harmful is not enough. We need to work with those 18% who don't see this as harmful. That's clearly a gap. But it's interesting to note how they are perceiving others. We had 17% of the girls who did not believe most other girls would see this as harmful. Likewise, we had 20% of the boys who did not think most girls would think this is harmful. We're very concerned about those groups. And we had about 35% of the girls who perceived that most boys would not think this is harmful. And 38% of the boys who perceived that most boys would not think this was harmful. So these become very important gaps that we want to start to explore, and we're very concerned about potentially students who may be misperceiving the norms, the shared beliefs of other students. So this was part of what we wanted to explore and reveal in this survey. Another issue we wanted to look at is their degree of acceptance of these behaviors. How acceptable are these behaviors? So we asked again how acceptable they thought they were. We also asked them how acceptable they thought most girls would think they would be, most boys would think they would be, how acceptable their parents would think they would be, and how acceptable most adults in their community would think. So we're even broadening beyond just their peers of girls and boys, but also thinking about their parents and the community. So we can see that first behavior, repeatedly contacting somebody, a third of them saying that's unacceptable, about half saying it's neutral, and some saying it's acceptable. The fact that we've got a good chunk of students in the neutral is an opportunity that we can shift them. I think we want to grow that degree of sensing that it's unacceptable. When we look at making a threatening or aggressive comment about someone, again, overwhelming majority of both boys and girls recognizing this as unacceptable, although we clearly have room to grow both of those, in particular the boys. But now it is interesting to explore how they perceived others would respond. In particular, when we look at the making threatening or aggressive comments, we had a very high sense, most girls recognizing that as unacceptable. But we had a number of girls, 18%, who did not think most other girls would think it was unacceptable. And we had about 28% who did not perceive most boys would say it was unacceptable. Boys, we had about 27% who did not think most girls would think it was unacceptable. And we had about 34% of the boys thinking most boys would think it was not unacceptable. So this is important. This sense of whether a behavior is acceptable or not is very important in terms of influence engagement with that behavior. And we've clearly got a number of students who are misperceiving what the culture is amongst others. We can also see that how they perceived those beliefs amongst their parents, which may be an opportunity to have some parents more actively communicate what they believe around this, as well as perceptions around what the community's beliefs are. And in particular, 20% of the boys indicating that they did not say that their most adults in their community would say these behaviors were unacceptable. Now, of course, we don't know what parents or adults in the community think about these behaviors. We didn't survey them. We don't know. That's an interesting area for future work, and certainly something we would like to explore. But we like to see how the students are perceiving other folks and how those people would respond to these kinds of questions. We can look at the same question with the other two behaviors. So again, very high degrees of high majority of students recognizing these behaviors as unacceptable. Although clearly with the boys, only 66% saying asking someone to do something sexual they did not want to do being unacceptable. We have a lot of room to grow that one. Again, we can explore how they're perceiving what others are thinking. We can see, 44% of the girls not perceiving that most boys would think that this was unacceptable. Now, we had 2/3 of the boys, which actually is most boys, saying it's unacceptable, but that needs to grow higher. We can also see, a similar percentage. We got 43% of the boys thinking most boys would not think it was unacceptable. So we clearly need to grow the belief that it's unacceptable, and we need to establish that both boys and girls agree that this is unacceptable. We can also see some misperceptions or some interesting beliefs about what parents or adults in the community are thinking. And again, we don't necessarily know that those are misperceptions because we don't know what those folks are believing. We can see some similar gaps in terms of forcing someone to do sexual things that they do not want to do. Again, this 24% of the girls not knowing or not believing that most boys would say that was unacceptable. In fact, 84% of the boys did say it was unacceptable. That is not all of them, but that is most of them. We're clearly worried about that 16% who are not seeing it as unacceptable, but certainly it's most. Similarly, we had 21% of the boys thinking most boys would not think it was unacceptable. So some misperceptions of their culture. So again, I know this is a lot of information on one screen. You may want to pause the webinar and just study this for a while and think about the different patterns. You sort of have to go back and forth and see what everybody is thinking and thinking about others. What we start to see from this are there definitely some opportunities to grow some important beliefs amongst girls and boys, but also some beliefs about what others are thinking and what are the perceptions of their culture. And so that those are important opportunities when we think about growing health and safe cultures. We also wanted to explore their sense of control. So we asked a question: suppose you were dating someone and they started doing these kinds of behaviors that we've been asking about. How much do you feel like you're in control? In other words, do you feel like you have to put up with it, or could you take steps to stop dating them or stop these behaviors? And again, we aggregated these we had a 7-point response scale, but we aggregated them into 3 groups: low control, moderate control, and high control. Obviously, our goal is to grow a high sense of control among students. We want them to be in control and feel in control. That gives them a higher sense of empowerment and being able to protect themselves. As you can see, they had some degree of higher control for some of these behaviors, but I think there's definitely room to grow a higher degree of control. And this will be important because this sense of control, this sense of perceived efficacy to address these issues is very important. And part of that is going to be teaching them how to talk about this, how to speak up about this, that talking about these things is something that's appropriate in a relationship, but I'm not sure they maybe feel comfortable about that. And that can certainly influence their sense of control. But certainly when I look at a slide like this, I see there's a lot of opportunity to grow control and a sense of control around these. Finally, the last topic we wanted to explore was their willingness to intervene with a friend. Intervention is something we're very interested in at our center. And how do we grow cultures where folks are engaging in health and safe behaviors themselves, but also where they are comfortable speaking up when they see potentially others engaging in risky behaviors and growing protection for our peers. So we wanted to explore if they had a friend who was dating someone, and that the person that friend was dating started to engage in these behaviors, how likely would they speak up, or their willingness to speak up to their friend about these behaviors? And what you can see is that in general, for some of these behaviors, certainly as we move to some of the higher risk behaviors, there was a high willingness. I think there's definitely opportunity to grow this. There seemed to be higher willingness among females than among males. So an opportunity to grow that willingness to speak up amongst males. We know in our experience, even a high willingness does not mean that people are actually engaging in the behavior. They may have a high willingness, but there are other factors that come to bear, and potential their confidence in terms of speaking up, or how do you speak up. So high willingness alone is not enough to assure that they are speaking up. But it's interesting to start to look at that willingness to speak up and to start establishing a bit of a sense as to where they are on that. And certainly as we're looking at this, we've got a good place to start, but there's certainly ways to grow these behaviors. So some of our next steps, we'll be continuing to analyze the results. We've shared here with you 4 of the behaviors. As we mentioned, there are 4 other behaviors. We're looking at those as well. Then we also want to start looking at the interrelationship between these various beliefs and their willingness to intervene. We also did ask some questions about their intervening behaviors. We haven't shared those during this webinar, but we'll do that in the future. So we really want to start to explore more how these beliefs are connected and which beliefs might be really important to focus on. And we'll use that information to develop a next generation of surveys. This was our first survey exploring this. We'll develop some next generation surveys. This survey was long. We felt comfortable doing that because this was a purchase panel, so people were being compensated a degree for their time. But as we start thinking about a survey that might be done in a school system, we need to make this survey shorter and tighter. So we're going to look at how we can narrow the survey down, really focus in on some key things. From that information, we'd really like to start to inform some tools and resources that potentially schools and others could use to explore and understand the culture around dating violence and health and safe dating practices within their schools, how they can grow more safe and healthy dating practices, and in particular, how we can start to explore this idea of growing tools to grow bystander engagement, this idea of safety citizenship, of how do we grow pro-social behaviors where folks are more comfortable speaking up when they see others in potentially risky or unsafe behaviors. So that starts to normalize the culture. It starts to establish health and safe cultures. It also helps to address and hopefully protect individuals who are in a risky situation. So we want to explore what are the beliefs associated with that, and ultimately what kind of tools we could develop to help grow that. If you are interested, we are looking potentially for some schools to participate in some more studies around this. So if you're doing work on this topic within a school, or you're engaged with a school, send us an email. This is our generic email. We'll make sure it gets to the right folks. We're looking at potentially having hopefully some more surveys available in the fall of 2017 to where we could start to explore this and then be able to engage in some partnerships with schools as we move forward to look at aspects of tools and other resources. If you're just interested in learning more about our approach, which we call the positive culture framework, this idea of leveraging positive culture, shared beliefs, values, attitudes, behaviors that support health and safety, and how we leverage those to then improve health and safety even more, you can check out access to our training. We have periodic training that is available. We also there are also just resources across our website that you can explore to see and learn more about some of our approaches. I hope you found some information valuable here. We appreciate all the work that you do. Thank you very much.